In the heart of the Galactic Council chamber, the hum of alien voices filled the vast, dome-like room. Luminescent panels flickered, casting a surreal glow on representatives of countless species seated in tiered circles. The cacophony of debate echoed, each voice clamoring for dominance, their tones laced with condescension and disdain. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Marcus Hale, his human figure dwarfed by the grandeur of the chamber and the imposing forms of the alien delegates. Yet, his calm demeanor seemed to command the room. Marcus adjusted his sleek, black diplomatic jacket and spoke, his voice firm yet measured. "Esteemed representatives, I stand here not to plead but to reason. Humanity's advancements, though swift, are not a threat to the galaxy. They are a testament to our resilience, a quality forged in the fires of adversity. We have no designs of conquest, only survival and cooperation." A low rumble of laughter rippled through the chamber. The delegate from the Trezzic Dominion, a serpentine figure with gleaming scales, curled its lip in a sneer. "Cooperation? From a species that barely crawled out of its own atmosphere a century ago? Your kind is ambitious, reckless, and expendable." Marcus met the Trezzic's gaze, unflinching. "Our history may be brief in comparison to yours, Delegate Zykar, but it is not without merit. We've offered technologies that have healed ecosystems and cured diseases, freely and without expectation. Yet you propose sanctions that would cripple our growth and isolate Earth." The representative of the Volatar Consortium, a crystalline entity shimmering in hues of blue and gold, interjected, its voice resonating like chimes. "Your advancements are an anomaly, Ambassador Hale. They upset the balance of power. We cannot allow a species as volatile as yours to rise unchecked." Marcus allowed a brief pause, his gaze sweeping the room. "Volatility, you say? The same volatility that allowed us to rebuild after global catastrophes? To innovate under pressure? You see it as chaos. I see it as adaptability." Orvax, the Council's presiding chair, loomed over the proceedings, his massive form casting a shadow over Marcus. "Enough posturing, human. The vote will proceed. Earth's actions have destabilized interstellar relations. Sanctions are necessary to preserve galactic harmony." A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber, though a few delegates exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus took a step forward, his voice unwavering. "Harmony built on fear and suppression is no harmony at all. You fear what you do not understand, what you cannot control." The laughter grew louder now, cruel and mocking. An avian delegate flapped its wings dismissively. "Bold words from a species that relies on scraps of trade to survive. Without us, Earth is nothing." Marcus tilted his head slightly, his expression inscrutable. "Perhaps. But history has shown that when humanity is left with nothing, it creates everything." The chamber fell into an uneasy silence, the weight of his words sinking in. Orvax, unfazed, raised a massive clawed hand. "The Council will vote. Earth's fate is sealed." Marcus watched as the holographic panels lit up around the room, each delegate casting their vote. The outcome was as he anticipated, an overwhelming majority in favor of sanctions. A few representatives abstained, their hesitation noted but ultimately irrelevant. Orvax's deep voice boomed. "The motion passes. Ambassador Hale, Earth will comply with the sanctions or face consequences." Marcus exhaled slowly, then reached for his data pad, deactivating it with a flick of his wrist. He looked up, his gaze steady and unyielding. "You've sealed your fate. Not ours." The room froze, the weight of his statement slicing through the air like a blade. Orvax's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat, human?" "No," Marcus replied evenly. "It's an observation." He turned and began to walk toward the chamber's exit, his steps measured, his posture unshaken. A young aide hurried after him, whispering urgently. "Ambassador, what happens now?" Marcus paused at the doorway, glancing back at the chamber where voices were already erupting in heated debate. "Now? They learn." Without another word, he stepped through the archway, leaving the council behind. Silence fell in the chamber, the echoes of his departure lingering longer than anyone expected. The chamber remained quiet for a moment after Marcus Hale's departure, his final words hanging in the air like a distant storm warning. But the quiet didn't last. The representatives erupted into a cacophony of voices, a mixture of amusement, indignation, and confusion. Some dismissed his exit as mere theatrics, while others felt a creeping unease they refused to voice aloud. "That human truly believes his kind holds leverage," Zycar hissed, his scales catching the flickering light. "A delusion born of desperation." Orvax raised a clawed hand to silence the room. His deep, resonant voice carried an air of finality. "The matter is settled. Humanity will either comply or be forced into isolation. If they resist, they will face consequences far beyond their capacity to endure." A crystalline delegate chimed in, its voice dissonant and melodic. "Perhaps we should monitor their actions closely. Humans are unpredictable. Their capacity for innovation is disproportionately high for their stage of development." Orvax waved the concern aside. "Their unpredictability is precisely what makes them irrelevant. They react, but they cannot plan on a galactic scale. Their arrogance will break under the weight of our unity." Meanwhile, Marcus Hale and his aide, Lieutenant Rhea Callan, walked through the long corridor leading to their shuttle. Rhea's face was pale, her brow furrowed in concern. "Ambassador, are we truly just walking away? The sanctions could devastate Earth's economy. Our allies might turn against us." Marcus stopped, turning to her with a calm expression. "Rhea, do you believe we walked into that chamber unprepared? Every scenario they proposed, every sanction they discussed, was anticipated. The Council has underestimated humanity, as they always do. But what if they push harder than we expect?" she asked, her voice low but urgent. "What if they force military action? Earth doesn't have the fleet strength to stand against them." Marcus smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "What they see as weakness, we see as opportunity. Humanity has always thrived under pressure. While they've been distracted with maintaining their hierarchies, we've been preparing for a far different future." They boarded the shuttle, and Marcus keyed in a secure transmission code. A holographic interface lit up, displaying a message marked with Earth's Defense Coalition insignia. "Initiate protocol eclipse," he said, his voice steady. "Begin immediate asset reallocation. Assume full operational readiness." Rhea stared at him, wide-eyed. "Protocol eclipse? That's everything we have. Ambassador, you're signaling full strategic autonomy." Marcus nodded. "They left us no choice. They've made their move. Now we make ours." Back in the council chamber, dissent was beginning to brew. A few representatives spoke in hushed tones, their voices barely audible over the general noise. A delegation from the outer colonies leaned toward one another, their holographic display showing Earth's recent technological developments. "Did you see the energy signatures from their latest colony ships?" one whispered. "They've mastered adaptive shielding. That's a leap even the core systems haven't achieved," another replied. "And what about their advancements in quantum drives? If the sanctions force them to innovate further, it might accelerate their capabilities rather than hinder them." Orvax's booming voice cut through the noise again. "Enough speculation. Humanity has been warned, and they will either comply or collapse. This council's authority is absolute." Despite his confidence, several representatives exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen something in Hale's departure that Orvax had dismissed, a quiet certainty, as though he held cards the council couldn't see. For centuries, the council had relied on overwhelming force to maintain its dominance, but humanity's rapid ascent was unlike anything they had encountered before. In the days that followed, the sanctions were enacted. Trade routes to Earth were blocked, critical resource shipments halted, and diplomatic channels severed. Earth's colonies in the outer systems found themselves isolated, with Council-aligned factions pressuring them to withdraw their allegiance. At first, the Council's actions seemed to be working. Reports trickled in of economic disruptions and protests on Earth, of supply chain breakdowns and heightened tensions within human territories. But then, something unexpected happened. Earth's response was silence. No appeals. No protests. No attempts to negotiate. Humanity simply withdrew, its ships retreating from contested territories, its diplomats recalled. What little trade remained was rerouted through untraceable channels, and reports emerged of human fleets moving to uncharted regions of space. Within the council, speculation ran rampant. "They're retreating," one delegate declared confidently. "They know they can't survive without us." Another disagreed. "Or perhaps they're consolidating, preparing for something we don't yet understand." Orvax dismissed the notion with a wave of his massive hand. "Let them hide. Without access to our resources, they will crumble." But as the weeks passed, cracks began to show, not in Earth's defenses, but in the Council's assumptions. Reports of human activity in neutral sectors increased, their ships equipped with unfamiliar technologies that defied conventional analysis. Entire fleets seemed to vanish from known space, only to reappear in unexpected locations, their movements calculated and deliberate. The Council's intelligence networks struggled to keep up. "They've gone dark," a frazzled analyst reported to Orvax during a closed session. "We've lost all access to their communications. It's as though they've disappeared." Orvax growled, his patience wearing thin. "Humans are not magicians. They cannot simply vanish." "No," the analyst replied hesitantly. "But they can adapt faster than we anticipated." As tensions within the council grew, Marcus Hale's words echoed in the minds of those who had dismissed him. "You've sealed your fate. Not ours." For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council found itself unsure, not of its power, but of its assumptions. And in that uncertainty, a shadow of doubt began to creep in. The Galactic Council's unease grew with each passing day. Rumors of Earth's silence were spreading, whispered in shadowed corridors and private communications between delegates. It was unlike humanity to withdraw so completely. For a species so often vocal, their quiet absence felt deliberate, calculated even. Delegates began to argue more frequently, their once unified voices fracturing under the weight of growing uncertainty. "What do we actually know about Earth's current movements?" an insected delegate snapped during an emergency session. Its mandibles clicked nervously, betraying its normally composed demeanor. "Surely our intelligence networks can provide answers," a grim-faced analyst responded, his holographic projection shimmering faintly. "Our surveillance stations around Earth's colonies have gone offline. Attempts to infiltrate their communications have failed, they've encrypted everything. Even our attempts to intercept physical supply chains have yielded no results. They've simply adapted." "Preposterous," Orvax growled, slamming a clawed fist against his console. "Their isolation will cripple them. No species can thrive without trade, without resources. This is a bluff, and nothing more." Yet, beneath his bluster, Orvax felt the growing unease. Reports from neutral sectors painted a troubling picture. Human ships had been sighted in remote regions, areas once considered barren. These vessels were not their usual clunky, utilitarian craft. They were sleek, silent, and bristling with unknown technology. "They're testing us," another delegate whispered, its gelatinous form rippling uneasily. "They've gone to ground, but they're not broken. They're preparing for something." Still, Orvax refused to acknowledge the possibility. "Let them prepare. When they return to plead for forgiveness, this council will dictate the terms." Meanwhile, far from the council's chambers, the Zorath Dominion began its invasion. The Zorath were a nomadic warlike species, their fleets vast and merciless. They had no interest in diplomacy or alliances. They sought only conquest and subjugation. The Council had long believed their combined military strength would deter any such attack. They were wrong. The first attack came without warning. A border station in the core systems was reduced to molten debris within hours. No warning, no demands, just overwhelming destruction. Reports flooded into the council chambers, each more dire than the last. "They've bypassed our outer defenses," a military commander reported, her voice trembling. "Their fleet is advancing into core territory. Casualties are mounting. We can't hold them." Orvax, for the first time, hesitated. The Council had always relied on its vast fleets to maintain dominance. but the Zorath were relentless. Their ships employed technology the Council had never encountered: adaptive shielding, hyper-efficient weapons, and strategies that exploited every weakness in the Council's defenses. In the chaos, the Council turned to its allies. Pleas for reinforcements were sent to every member species, but the responses were disheartening. Many were too far removed from the conflict to act quickly. Others saw the Zorath invasion as an opportunity to renegotiate their position within the Council's power structure. The once mighty alliance was unraveling. "Call Earth," a voice finally said, cutting through the clamor. The chamber fell silent. It was an unthinkable suggestion, yet the desperation in the room was palpable. Even Orvax did not immediately dismiss the idea. He leaned forward, his massive frame casting a long shadow over the table. "And what would we offer them?" he growled. "We sanctioned them, isolated them. Do you think they would even answer our call?" The crystalline delegate who had spoken earlier responded, its tone cautious. "We underestimated them once. If there is even a chance they would come to our aid, we must take it. The Zorath will not stop at the core systems, they will consume us all." Reluctantly, a communication was sent to Earth. Days passed with no response. The Council's anxiety deepened. Reports of Zorath incursions grew graver. Entire planets were falling under their control. Refugees streamed into safer sectors, their stories harrowing. Then, a single transmission arrived. It was not from Earth's diplomatic channels but from a deep space outpost long thought abandoned. The holographic display showed Marcus Hale, his face calm and unreadable. The chamber erupted in whispers as the transmission began. "Ambassador Hale," Orvax said, his voice straining to maintain authority. "You've received our message. Humanity has a chance to redeem itself." Hale raised a hand, silencing him. "Redeem ourselves? It seems the Council's arrogance remains intact, even in desperation." The tension in the room was palpable. Orvax's eyes narrowed, but he held his tongue. Hale continued, his tone unyielding. "You've misjudged humanity from the beginning. You believed sanctions would break us, that isolation would weaken us. But humanity does not crumble under pressure. We adapt. We innovate. And when the storm comes, we do not stand idle, we thrive within it." A few delegates exchanged uneasy glances. Hale's confidence was unnerving. "The Zorath are your problem, not ours," Hale said bluntly. "You've chosen to dismiss us, to mock our efforts, to isolate us. And now you face the consequences of your hubris. You cannot mean to abandon the galaxy to this threat," a delegate exclaimed, its voice rising in panic. Hale's gaze hardened. "Abandon? No. Humanity does not abandon. But neither do we forget. You forced us to stand alone. And now we've learned to do so. What happens next is no longer up to you." The transmission ended abruptly. The chamber descended into chaos, voices overlapping in panic and anger. Orvax sat silently, his claws digging into the armrests of his chair. For the first time in his long tenure, he felt the weight of doubt pressing heavily upon him. Hale's words had been a warning, not of retaliation, but of indifference. The Council, for all its power, was no longer in control. Humanity had moved beyond their reach. The Zorath fleet advanced with unrelenting precision, leaving devastation in its wake. Planet after planet fell, their defenses crumbling against the overwhelming force of the invaders. The Galactic Council's combined fleets, once a symbol of unity and dominance, were scattered and ineffective. Reports flooded in of entire star systems succumbing to Zorath control, their populations enslaved or annihilated. The Council's chamber, once a place of confidence and authority, was now a battlefield of fear and desperation. "We are out of options!" a delegate shouted, its voice trembling. "Our fleets are in disarray, and our allies are too fractured to respond effectively. The Zorath will reach the heart of the core systems within weeks." Orvax sat in silence, his massive frame rigid, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the galaxy. It was a tapestry of red markers, each one a site of destruction wrought by the Zorath. For all his bluster and arrogance, he now faced the truth: the Council was powerless. "Send another message to Earth," he said finally, his voice low and heavy with resignation. "Beg if we must. Offer them anything. We need them." The Council complied, but this time, there was no immediate response. Days turned to weeks, and the Zorath fleet drew closer. The Council's last defensive line, a vast array of ships and orbital platforms surrounding the core systems, prepared for what they knew would be a losing battle. Then, just as hope seemed lost, something changed. Sensors at the edge of the core systems detected the arrival of unknown vessels. At first, the Council assumed they were Zorath reinforcements, but the readings didn't match. These ships were larger, faster, and unlike anything the Council had ever seen. They moved with precision, their sleek designs radiating an air of silent confidence. The Council scrambled to identify the fleet, but the answer came before they could fully process the data. A single broadcast was transmitted across all channels. Marcus Hale's face appeared once again, his expression calm and unreadable. "Members of the Galactic Council," he began, his tone measured. "It seems your time of reckoning has arrived." The chamber erupted into a flurry of voices, but Hale continued, unbothered by the chaos. "Humanity does not seek vengeance, nor do we seek to rule. But when we warned you of the dangers of underestimating us, we spoke the truth. You dismissed us, sanctioned us, mocked us. And yet here we are, prepared to do what you cannot." The display shifted to show the human fleet in formation. The ships were vast, their surfaces gleaming with unknown alloys, their weapons systems glowing faintly with restrained energy. They outnumbered the Zorath fleet 2-1, a fact that left the Council stunned. Hale's voice hardened. "Humanity has no interest in proving itself to you. We act not for recognition, but for survival. And while you sought to isolate us, we built alliances of our own, alliances with those you dismissed, those you considered beneath your notice. Together, we've created something stronger than your Council ever could." The broadcast cut out, and the chamber fell into stunned silence. Moments later, live feeds from the front lines showed the human fleet engaging the Zorath. The battle was swift and decisive. Human ships moved with surgical precision, their weapons cutting through the Zorath fleet's adaptive shields as though they were nothing. The Zorath, so accustomed to their overwhelming superiority, found themselves outmatched for the first time in centuries. The Council watched in awe as the human fleet dismantled the invaders. Massive Zorath dreadnoughts were reduced to debris in moments, their formations shattered. Within hours, the once unstoppable Zorath fleet was in full retreat, their surviving ships fleeing into the void. When the battle was over, the human fleet remained in formation, silent and unmoving. The Council sent messages of gratitude and requests for negotiations, but no response came. It was as though the humans were waiting, for what, the Council could only guess. Finally, a single ship broke formation and approached the Council's central station. It was not a warship but a diplomatic vessel, its sleek design a stark contrast to the utilitarian craft the Council had expected. When the ship docked, Marcus Hale emerged, his calm demeanor unchanged. He was escorted to the Council chamber, where the delegates awaited him in uneasy silence. Orvax, for all his arrogance, now seemed smaller, his towering frame hunched slightly. Hale stepped to the center of the chamber, his movements deliberate, his gaze steady. "You called for us," he began, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had been vindicated. "Not out of respect, but out of desperation. And we answered, not for you, but for the billions who would have suffered if we had not." Orvax opened his mouth to speak, but Hale raised a hand to silence him. "Do not mistake this for forgiveness. Humanity does not forget the lessons of the past. You sought to weaken us, to suppress us, to force us into submission. But instead, you gave us exactly what we needed, time." He paused, letting his words sink in. The chamber was so quiet that even the faint hum of the station's systems seemed deafening. "We do not seek your approval," Hale continued. "And we do not need your alliance. Humanity stands alone now, stronger than ever. Remember this moment, for it is the last time we will intervene on your behalf. Next time, the galaxy will have to fend for itself. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the council in stunned silence. His words were not a threat, but a declaration of independence, a reminder that humanity had risen above their doubts and dismissals. The chamber remained quiet long after he was gone, the delegates too shaken to speak. The message was clear. Humanity had outgrown the need for the council's validation. They had become something greater, a force that could no longer be ignored, underestimated, or controlled. And in the wake of their departure, the galaxy was forever changed.